Welcome to the Front Garden, brought to you by Coolabah Turf. Visit Victoria's premium instant turf supplier at coolturf.com.au.
Welcome to the Front Garden podcast, brought to you by Landscaping Victoria and proudly backed by Coolabah Turf. I'm Adam Hompas, landscaper by trade, first ever guest of this podcast and now your host. This is a podcast for anyone who lives and breathes landscaping. Whether you're on the tools, running the business, or just starting out, we're here to talk landscaping career journeys, industry trends, and everything in between. So thank you for joining me. Today, we're joined by Kurt Everard from TIACS. This is a conversation starter. TIACS is a home of a blue-collar counselling. It is a not-for-profit organisation providing professional, free mental health support Australia-wide. TIACS has a mission to start conversations surrounding mental health amongst Australia's blue-collar communities and provide accessible text or call counselling. They are linked to TradeMutt, aka the Funky Shirts, colourful workwear who donate profits to support TIACS. Welcome to the show, Kurt.
Cheers, mate. Yeah, it's a good little overview right from the get-go, hey?
Yeah, cool. It was all ready to go. So I'd like to have a chat and see how the organisation came about.
If we sort of go back to around 2015, our founders or our co-founders, Ed and Dan, they essentially met on a job site. Started on the first day, so they were kind of lumped together. Ed was an apprentice at the time. Dan was a sort of fully qualified carpenter. And their sort of story really kind of begins on that job site on a Thursday afternoon in December. So Dan got a call from one of his mates. This mate had been doing kind of labouring jobs for quite a while. He was trying to kind of nail down a mature age apprenticeship, but up until that point had sort of struggled to actually, nail one down. And on that Thursday afternoon, he called Dan and said, I got an apprenticeship. So cool. He seemed pumped up. Obviously, Dan was really pumped up for him. He knew that it had sort of been something he'd been trying for quite a while. A couple of days later, on Sunday morning, Dan received a call from his mate's dad to say that the previous night his mate had suicided.
Wow. So,
this obviously, came as a monumental shock to Dan, right? Like just a few days earlier, he was talking to him, he seemed happy, he was onto this, this next chapter of his life. But obviously he was sort of struggling on quite a deep level. And outside of the obvious, the reality for Dan in the short term was he was turning up to work each morning, turning up to the job site in tears, like he's just lost, one of his best mates. It's hard enough to lose someone, let alone to suicide. So he was turning up the job site in tears, and his sort of main supporter was Ed, his apprentice. And, Ed certainly, did the best he could, but, it's a difficult position to be in, obviously. So I guess as time went on, they sort of got talking and thought, well, we know, like, we're in the construction industry, but, any kind of blue collar industry, I'm sure, can attest to the fact that there's definitely people struggling. There's definitely people having thoughts of suicide. And there's definitely people suiciding. Like, I think the especially construction, but all sort of blue collar industries, people who are working with their hands, hard work and Aussies and stuff like that, they're overrepresented when it comes to struggles relating to mental health. But in their mind, they thought that the conversation was kind of being avoided for any number of reasons, a tough conversation, but the conversation wasn't being had enough, and people were sort of pushing aside, and there wasn't a whole lot of kind of hope or optimism in approaching these kinds of conversations. So their kind of bright idea, pun intended, I guess, was to kind of start their own workwear company, and TradeMutt essentially is the starting point for this whole conversation, because TIACS obviously, is who I represent, but TradeMutt was certainly the starting point, and the Funky Shirts, as you mentioned. So yeah. At the most basic level, the shirts are intended to start conversations and sort of generate that peer-to-peer support. And I think a really good example of this, I was in Townsville last week. I sort of roll around the TAFE campuses in Queensland talking to apprentices about TIACS. And having this conversation with them, and one apprentice sort of put his hand up and said, "Hey, I was down at the Strand last week, and I had my TradeMutt shirt on, and this bloke came up to me and was like, 'What's the deal with the shirt?'"
How good, exactly.
So they had like a quick yarn, they had a conversation, And then a couple hours later, they were still chatting. They were at the pub having a few beers.
That's great.
And I think that's kind of the TradeMutt shirt working on a recent example anyway, where it was a means to bring two people together. Now, obviously, we don't know the content of the conversation, and if they were talking about mental health stuff, awesome. But if they weren't, and they were just connecting as sort of two humans, there's a shirt kind of working.
What a perfect way to bring two people together to chat about things. Like, you can have a general conversation about it, but that's the perfect way to do it, is to have something physically there that people are going to look and go, hey, what's the deal with this?
Well, yeah, it is that icebreaker, right? Like, in my mind, that conversation wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for that shirt. I think it can be hard to just approach random people, right?
Absolutely.
And in that context, obviously, it was a little bit easier. Yeah, I guess within about 12 months of selling the shirts, they were sort of getting some common feedback from people saying, there's no doubt the shirt start conversations, but what happens if those conversations need to, continue or deepen, or if someone maybe needs to speak to a professional? Long story short, they sort of wanted to, do their bit to address that. And that's kind of where the idea for TIACS came in. So, like you mentioned, so we're a professional mental health counselling service. Tradies, truckies, farmers, landscapers, all blue-collar workers. It's obviously pretty broad areas, but providing that kind of, mental health support, that mental health counselling to anyone within those kinds of areas, yeah.
It's so important. Even I remember, growing up, you do have that type of aspect of you're a trader, you sort of suck it up, swallow it up. I think what I really like about what you guys are doing is that it continues on. You've got the conversation, and then you've got the text line, you can do the calls. So that's really fantastic. Have you seen a shift since you guys started? Was it 2020? Do you have an influx of extra callers and texters coming through? Is it progressively growing?
Oh yeah, for sure, definitely. Yeah, like I've been with TIACS for about almost 4 years now. And during that time, we've kind of made a lot of changes internally. We're kind of shoring up our systems and the way we collect data and the way we do things in general. But certainly, we're taking more and more calls. And I guess more specifically, I think when I started, we weren't getting as many people from our target industries when we're sort of in the early year or two. Whereas now, I think last financial year, I think 95% of our clients are from our our primary kind of industry. So those tradies, the truckies, the farmers, or the blue collar workers. So I think probably the biggest shift is being able to sort of target those clients specifically, because that's who we're trying to support, right? Like, no, it's not to say that we'll just push people away if they're not from those industries, but certainly that's our target groups. And I think that I'm kind of hearing more and more sentiments from individuals calling in that they believe that there is kind of a shift in the conversation, and they've noticed a shift in the conversation relating to mental health stuff, and it kind of being more of a normalized thing. And not to say that it's specifically an easy conversation to have, but certainly that they are noticing it having, it being had more. Average client is kind of in their late 30s. 37, 38 years old. So for a lot of those people that have been working, in their industry for 15, 20 years, that's a lot of time to kind of notice these kinds of shifts that have occurred. And obviously I want there to be, that shift in how we approach this kind of stuff. Like, that's what we're trying to do. And I don't necessarily have feet on the ground. I mean, I talk to a lot of people, but the people who are coming into our space are certainly noting that they think that this conversation is sort of changing and being one that's a bit more approachable, and certainly kind of being a bit more important to kind of touch on.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think being in physical environment also compounds the mental health aspect? So with the stresses of, or getting into fatigue and the stresses of the day-to-day grind on site, do you think that creates people's mental health to sort of decline a bit than to give you a call?
It's very much like a chicken or the egg kind of thing, right? I think when people reach out, I think the reality is most people who are reaching out to TIACS, they're not experiencing, really conventionally complex mental health concerns. Like, we aren't necessarily getting people reaching out with psychosis and really kind of complex trauma and stuff like that. I'd say most people are reaching out because they're experiencing those natural ebbs and flows that we all sort of experience in life and those cycles that we can find ourselves in. So I think when it comes to, say, like the physical nature of work, like I think a very basic example is someone's working in a tough physical environment. Like you say, they're fatigued. They might have had a kind of a crappy day. They go home. They take that home. They're struggling to kind of disconnect from work. So they're taking home, they're sort of taking it out on some level on their families. They're not in that kind of position to be present and calm with their families. And then they don't sleep well because they're upset about what's happening. And then they get up and they're fatigued, not only from their physical job, but from not having a good night's sleep. And then they go to work and this cycle kind of continues. So that's a very, very basic example, but I think it highlights that kind of nothing happens in isolation. So whether or not it starts at work, whether or not it starts at home, whether or not it starts from, some kind of, loss, like a loss of a loved one or whatever it may be, all these different things feed into other areas in our life. And I think it's easy for me, like I'm in the office, like I'm either at home or kind of in the office. So I don't, I've worked in physical jobs in the past, but currently, that's not something I experience, but I know that compounds whatever's going on for people, because it's hard to, like, you can't have like an off day, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If you're tired and not feeling 100%, you can't just go, I'm just gonna take the piss today. You don't really have the opportunity to do that. So it does sort of continue on, I guess, unfortunately.
It's interesting when you mentioned how it sort of ventures further into the family side of things. So what people could be feeling at work then suddenly translates back home. Do you feel that the calls you get from the guys or girls who call up also mention, look, I felt like this on site and I either didn't vent it on site or speak to someone, but then, as you said, I took it out on my family and then that's caused issues here and there. So do you know what I mean? Has that sort of come up?
I think pretty much the entire, again, it's the chicken or the egg kind of thing, but I think since I've been at TIACS, pretty much every single kind of month or quarter that I've been with TIACS, the number one most common reason that people have reached out is through some kind of dysfunctional conflict within their relationships.
Yeah.
And I'd say most of the time when I'm talking about relationships, I'm talking, romantic relationships. So husband, wife, partner, whatever it may be. So even if there's, a variety of different things happening, struggles within the relationship space are certainly really, really common. And of course, if stuff at work is a bit tough, we're not going to be in a good position to approach conversations and situations with our spouse, with our kids, all those kinds of things, right? So it is a very, very common thing for sure. And that's sort of why I mentioned the kind of the nature of our average, for lack of a better word, caller. They're experiencing things that we all experience. Like this is, I'm not trying to be too preachy here, but ultimately, most of our clients are just going through those things that we all go through. And this is what we're trying to normalize is that we experience issues at work. We experience issues within our relationships. We experience all these issues. Like everyone experiences these things. Therefore, if it's a normal experience and unfortunately somewhat of a universal experience, then there's nothing wrong with kind of going, I'm going to get on the phone and call TIACS or whatever. Like
Absolutely.
I'm going to go to face and have a conversation. Like we're just one service, right? All we want to do is encourage people to seek support through the means that is best for them. And certainly highlighting the kind of the universal nature of some of these struggles is a very important thing for us to highlight, especially when we're kind of talking in these kind of spaces where people maybe haven't got a whole lot of experience with counselling.
I actually really love what you said before about how to get it out there, that you went to the TAFEs, went to the schools, and that's such a great avenue because a lot of the time it's the apprentices that will be feeling that really hard pinch. They're nervous, they're trying to learn this and that, and approaching them there is probably a really, really good idea. I was actually just curious how TIACS is funded.
Coolabah Turf is an award-winning grower of premium, drought-tolerant, self-repairing instant turf for Victorian residential, council and commercial landscape customers. Create the perfect backyard with your next project. The kind where barefoot kids chase balls and dreams, where family pets run wild and free, and where summer barbecues with friends and neighbours turn into memories that last a lifetime. Get in touch with the friendly crew at Coolabah Turf today. Call 1800 055 515 or visit coolturf.com.au. LV members who mention this ad will get free delivery on their first order.
Essentially 50% of the profits the starting point is TradeMutt again kind of thing, but 50% of the profits as a social enterprise, they've got to, provide 50% of their profits to a charity.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess in this case, we are that charity. So essentially whenever someone buys anything from TradeMutt, they're essentially contributing to someone else getting free counselling. Like obviously buying one shirt doesn't, equal one session, but they're contributing to the greater good. So whenever someone buys some TradeMutt stuff, that helps to fund the service. And then we've got kind of a range of different, industry partners that'll on kind of a month-by-month and yearly basis, provide us with funding. So we call them our alliance partners. So we try and have people, industry like organizations within construction, within mining, within agriculture, landscaping, within like the transport. We try and, obviously kind of get the word out there and help them kind of not only come to find us, but, provide us with some funding to ensure that people who are coming into TIACS never have to pay a cent. So it's kind of TradeMutt and then various alliance partners that fund us so that we can keep the service, and we run a pretty streamlined process. Obviously there's a variety of costs, but it's contributing to kind of our salaries and the kind of the other kind of logistics of the organization, like our systems and stuff like that.
Oh, absolutely. And you can see where it's come from since 2020. It's fantastic to see that happen.
Oh.
It's really, really good. How do you feel about the whole very old school approach of the quote unquote, she'll be right type of attitude? Do you see that is maybe changing a little bit in the blue collar industry? Yeah,
it's a great question. I think first off, an important caveat is my sample size are people that are coming into the counselling space and have challenged on some level the need to always go, she'll be right. So while I on some level feel like, that stoicism is changing on some level, where I'm gathering that kind of information from is people that are reaching out to counselling, right? So of course they're going to be a bit more willing, or they may have challenged that reality.
Yep.
And I think, like, for me, I think the nuance in the sort of the stoic, she'll be right kind of attitude is there's certainly times in life where we can use that approach. We may be going through a tough time, but we feel like we've got the tools and support around us that we can actually go, yeah, she'll be right. And I think that going she'll be right, there's like inherent optimism in that. So on some level, I definitely appreciate that approach, but I think it's about knowing when it's becoming a detrimental thing. Like it's possible to be too stoic, you know what I mean? And too she'll be right. Like there's got to be that point where you go, I'm in a situation where I don't have the tools, I don't have the support, I feel out of my depth. If I just go, she'll be right, I'm going to collapse under that. So I think for me, it's kind of finding that balance between understanding when you can be stoic and when you can go, she'll be right, and when you can't. And I think that's the kind of the difficulty, or the nuance, or whatever you want to call it, is understanding the kind of line between those 2 points. And to circle back to the apprentices, we're really, because we're trying to get that word out early. We're going, hey, reach out at the earliest point. We can be proactive. We can nip it in the bud and kind of get you back to love and life and kind of your normal you. And I think highlighting that there's times you can be stoic and there's times that you can't, and in kind of maybe the kind of the men and women who are sort of more into their careers, they're into their late 30s, their 40s, their 50s. I think that they're coming into the counselling space on some level because that's been an approach, whether consciously or not they've used, but they have with mortgage, kids, just general life stuff. They've sort of started to collapse under that kind of she'll be right. You can only stack so much on your shoulders before
Exactly.
you just sort of collapse, right?
But the best thing about it is that you've got a conduit for it. So I really like what you said in the sense of as long as you've got the tools to go, she'll be right, but maybe because I've used this tool, I've used TIACS, it's helping. It's helping me. And obviously there's other organisations like Are You OK? Are You OK Day, I think, is coming up on September 12th.
Yeah, it's mid-September, yeah.
Yeah. What I really like about TIACS is a bit more of the physical aspect. You've got the shirts, which starts a conversation. I sort of look at Are You OK as in someone saying, are you okay? But then that's it. I like what TIACS does. It starts a conversation, but with that as well. So if someone sees someone out in the shop with the shirts, they have a chat, what's the next port of call for someone wanting to get help? Like they text, they call the number and connect with.
We definitely try to address some of the barriers that are in place with reaching out for counselling. And certainly there are a number of them. I'm not sure, if your listeners or if you're aware, conventionally you go to your doctor, you get a mental health care plan, you get a referral. This takes time, it's costly, all that kind of stuff. So we don't require any of that. We've got a mobile number. There's no requirement for a referral, a doctor's note, Medicare card, anything like that. Essentially, if someone's got a phone and they've got reception, they can kind of give us a call. Now, that is a starting point. So, text through or call through. We tell people because, again, a lot of people have never spoken to a counsellor before coming into our service, and they're unsure of what to say or how to say it and all that kind of stuff. And the reality is it's not the responsibility of the person calling in to know what they want to say or how to say it. It's our responsibility as a counsellor to guide the conversation and provide support in and around whatever's going on for that person. So what we go out and tell people is if you don't know how to start, literally just send us a text saying hello.
That's so easy.
And kind of we'll take it from there.
And that's it. You've created such a easy access for people to message or to call. So that's, really, really awesome. Have you got a mixture of male and female that call? Obviously, the great thing is there's a lot of more female tradies coming into the industry. Do you have a mixture of calls or messages?
So I think, in our last financial year, since we've, kind of just ticked over that marker a month or so ago, around 75% of our callers are male, and 25% female. So certainly, I guess that says a couple of things. Firstly, it says that, this notion of men aren't talking. Well, we've got, a good percentage of men that are talking. Obviously, we'd like to kind of, see that continue to happen. But yeah, like you said, that there's more and more, females in these industries now, and they're getting in touch with us.
Yep.
I think if I'm right, I think kind of farming, agriculture, landscaping, that's got kind of the highest percentage of women callers. Construction has is quite small, but I believe that farming, ag, landscaping, that's got the highest percentage of sort of females compared to the other industries.
Okay, why do you think that is?
Good question. I'm not too sure, honestly. I guess I'm not overly surprised. Like again, when I go into the TAFEs, it's almost all men and maybe one or two girls in the class kind of thing. But if I'm thinking kind of more rural settings, it is kind of more of a community thing where everyone's kind of doing something, regardless of whether or not you're man, woman, adult, child. So to me, I think it's just more of a shared load, maybe in kind of the farming and ag kind of industry, but. I feel like you'd probably have a better idea of why that could be. I'm not too sure, though. It's interesting data to collect, and that's why we're sort of collecting it to go, okay, what does this mean? Like, what does this tell us? Yeah,
I think with the rural side of things, like the pressures those guys and girls must face is out of this world. I think
100%.
Landscaping is my background. When you're speaking, I'm thinking back, and absolutely I think mainly the physical aspects of it, and also just how mentally you have to be aware and on too. And I think that would absolutely contribute to people just getting too much in their heads.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, the head noise stuff, right? Like that's, again, relationships are very common reasons people reach out, but, that head noise or overthinking is incredibly kind of common, especially, people that are working. I know I've talked to plenty of people kind of in landscaping where they might be just working by themselves all week, especially if they work for themselves, for example. And if you're working by yourself, that's a lot of time to kind of be, lost in your own thoughts.
So
right?
true.
And sometimes, if you're in a good headspace, that's not a big deal. But if things are a bit tough right now and you're working by yourself, that's a lot of time to be lost in those thoughts.
That's so true. When you sort of start out and you do things on your own, you're right. Like you've got double J, triple J going, the sun's out. Yeah. But when the days are a little bit tough or bad and you've got no one to bounce off, I think that's where it's great to try to find internal support as well in your industry, whether it's the other apprentices, the foreman. As a leader, as a boss, it's so important to make sure that you're approachable to the guys and girls out there in the industry. That's
a really kind of important thing to raise, because I think back to, to some of my clients I've talked to, including ones I've talked to this week, the notion of having an approachable boss creates a profound shift in someone's life. For that boss, they may think it's not such a big deal, but for the especially for the young ones, to feel comfortable to go to their boss and either go, hey, I'm not sure about this, or what do you think about this? Like I had someone who was in a really, really, really bad spot, and most of it was because I had a lot of sort of anxieties at work. And we sort of went through a few things about how to kind of, get the courage, I guess, to approach their boss. And they did, and their boss was really good about it. Great. And that was a really huge shift in that individual's life. So I understand, I guess, people, it's that whole thing of going, oh, well, when I was up and coming and young, I got treated, like crap. So, they're going to, I'm going to do the same to others. And then someone will be like, I was treated like crap. And I want to make sure that people don't experience that. And especially, I think that notion of being approachable, gosh, the amount of clients I've had that have talked about how much easier it is to face tough situations if they've got an approachable boss. It's a very, very common theme, yeah.
Absolutely. And I think as an example, I did have a boss that was quite hard to work with, and I have spoken to my team about it, and I try to be as approachable as possible, whether it's just for anyone else just out there that wants to know about it, just a simple message, how you going, or just that sort of appreciation of what they're doing, because you don't want to go to work shaking. It's 7 a.m. in the morning. It's 7 in the morning. It's dark. You're around new people. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons why in particular landscaping probably has a higher rate of mental stress, because you are popped into an outdoor cold environment sometimes. Yeah. And down in Victoria we are. And especially when you're new, and if you do not have an approachable team, I think it could be really, really hard. And then that's the other thing, I think, is making sure that the bosses need to make sure, I think, that the team are also approachable too, because the boss can be on site then go. And then if the apprentice is around, the other qualified. So
yeah, it's like a culture piece, right? Like I think sometimes I think companies, organizations will try and contrive a quote good culture, and sometimes that can be through things that the kind of the employees actually don't really care about. But yeah, the reality is if someone's working in what they deem to be a good environment, the work they're doing is obviously going to be, I guess, easy to manage, and difficult jobs are going to be easy to manage if they've got kind of good people around them. Like I think it's just as simple as that, and creating a good culture in a workplace, is incredibly important for that reason, and among others, obviously.
Have you had any, I'm not going to say success stories, but have you had any feedback about how your organisation has helped others?
Yeah, so I was thinking about that before this, because it's a tough piece with confidentiality. I want to provide some kind of depth to give people an understanding of kind of some of the things we're doing, and I think from a numbers standpoint, I go, well, last financial year we sort of provided around 3,500 counselling sessions.
Wow!
So where no one had to pay for any of those, and all those people, out of all those 3,500 sessions or so, anyone who had a session also had like an initial session, right, where they call in and have a quick chat to like line things up. That's not included in those numbers. So we're providing like a good amount of free sessions to more than 1,000 people kind of last financial year. But I think I've got a few quotes that I'll just read off, because these are quotes that people were happy for us to sort of share. And I think that I'll just literally just quote them, because I think it's probably the best way to do it. But here's kind of a good one. I didn't know therapy could be like this. I've always felt so uncomfortable because it seemed like a clinical question and answer situation. With you, I just felt like I'm talking to a friend, but one who comes up with practical approaches to my struggles. My whole view on therapy has changed. I got excited about our sessions and talking to you. I had no idea these sorts of services existed, and I can tell with absolute certainty that my mental well-being has improved since starting these sessions. Therapy's always seemed a little bit out of reach, because it's so expensive, so I've never been able to do it for long enough. So this has truly been a blessing. In our sessions, you've challenged me in my mind. You put me in a space where I can understand what options I had rather than fight or flight, that I had a choice and I can be in control. I now understand the difference between blaming others and being accountable for what I do. You were inquisitive and always caring. I felt welcomed and comforted, and you never made out that there was something broken or that I needed to be fixed. I've always felt when I tried to get support before, I had to just accept I was broken. So, there are kind of a good few examples. And I think one really impactful piece is, recently. So we had a young lad, he reached out last year. I spoke with one of the counsellors, not myself, but one of the other counsellors, had a positive experience. And when I was up in Cairns at the Bunnings Expo last year, he came and said hello. We had a bit of a yarn.
Yeah, great.
And then he ended up raising a bunch of money for us. He did this big run in a month where on the first day of the month, he did 1 kilometre. On the second, he did 2, all the way up to doing 29 kilometres on the 29th and 30 kilometres on the 30th. So he ran a lot of kilometres, all raising money for us. And then when I was in Cairns last week talking to the apprentices, he's sort of like, oh, I'd love to be able to come and support you in some way like that. So he came and I did the spiel, like I talked about the service, and I said, I've never done an apprenticeship, I've never been a tradie, and I've never used TIACS, but here's someone who has. So he's a bloke who reached out last year, got some support, raised money for us by doing an incredible physical feat, and then is joining us on kind of conversations that we're having in the community because he wants to be able to sort of forward the message. Now, I think that's a credit to him as an individual and the kind of person he is. He's a great lad, and clearly wants to kind of give back to the community. But I guess I'm biased. Obviously, I think it's a credit to our organisation as well, and what we're able to do to people. Or do for people, I should say. So, I mean, great that we can kind of provide those sessions. Like I said, the data stuff, the number stuff is quite rich. The stories obviously is important, like some of those kind of quotes. But I think this example with this lad that's sort of done quite a bit for us, just out of the good of his heart, essentially. I think that those 3 kind of, I guess, areas are good examples of what we're doing. And I mean, I could provide you with a lot more, but I think that kind of is a good overview and maybe helps your listeners to kind of get a bit of an idea of the kind of things we're doing and the kind of impact we're I guess achieving.
Oh, exactly. And that's fantastic. It's good to hear. And those type of stories, the quotes that you were mentioning before, that must be a good sense of accomplishment for you guys too, knowing that that's helping, knowing that it's getting out there.
It's interesting. I don't do too well with positive feedback, I guess. So I'm always someone who just deflects back to the person. So they'll provide their feedback. I go, you've done the work. You've showed up and had these sessions. In between our sessions, you've done the work. So, this is a credit to you. So I like to put it back onto that person because, usually a big reason why they've got into the position they have is through their hard work. But it is, I guess, on some level nice to get that kind of pat in the back as well, right? And help us to know that we're on track with what we're doing essentially, and what we're saying we're doing.
And that's it. But you can see that you're genuine about what you believe, that you really want to help. And that comes through a lot more than, anything else. The fact that you guys are genuine about what you're trying to do and that you are helping, So, and I can see that by speaking to you. So it's awesome to see.
Yeah, that's a great piece of feedback. I won't lie. Sometimes you get stuff like that. You hope that you come across as genuine and all that kind of stuff. And it's great when that is a piece of feedback that I appreciate. So cheers.
No problem. And we're our own worst enemy. So we're the ones who are going to think, do I come across genuine or is this scripted? Yeah. Where would you see TIACS going in the next 5, 10 years? What's the goal?
Oh, geez.
To continue what you're doing, the amazing work?
I think that the sky's the limit kind of thing. We've contributed to the community on a good level so far, but obviously we're just trying to continue to increase. We started in Queensland, so the highest percentage of clients come from Queensland. Obviously really? Victoria and New South Wales, much bigger populations, but Queensland has the most callers. So for me, I guess in the short term, I'd love to kind of see the other states in Australia, especially say like WA, South Australia, Northern Territory, for us to kind of get awareness out to those states, because ultimately they're where, the least amount of calls come from. And especially in WA, we've got all the mining and NTs, a lot of rural and agriculture and farming and all these different kind of things. So for me individually, I'd love to kind of, I guess, even the distribution around Australia and kind of, get that awareness out there. But I think we just want to be known as like the home of blue collar counselling. Like we feel like we're the only organisation doing what we're doing in terms of providing that sort of free, ongoing and confidential kind of counselling. And we want to be known as, the home and certainly the number one kind of organisation doing this kind of in Australia. So it's a good question. I think it's just continuing on, continuing the momentum that we're sort of gaining or that we're gathering, and essentially just trying to propel towards, what I think our ceiling is, which is, I'm not saying we're going to become as big as Lifeline or Beyond Blue, but it'd be good to kind of be a service that's known or is talked about in the same conversation as those services, even though they're different, but they're still that kind of phone counselling kind of stuff. And it'd be great to kind of be in the conversation with them and be as known, I guess. Yeah, absolutely.
So on that, in terms of pushing it a little bit further into the other states, what could listeners do? I'm assuming buy the shirts, start the conversation that way.
Yeah, I mean, the shirt obviously is great, but I think it's more just going, what am I sort of, I guess, what's the word? Like what's my, who's in my circle? What's my sort of reach and what are my sort of talents, I guess. I guess I understand, I guess, approaching conversations about mental health, like I'm a counsellor, right? So like this is kind of my job, but I know it's kind of a hard one to kind of do. And I think it's just about making these small little changes here and there and going, hey, I actually know someone who's been going through a tough time. Like I think we can all cast our mind to someone in our circle now or in the past who has gone through a breakup or has lost a loved one or whatever it may be. And I think it's kind of being more attuned to those kind of little things happening. Or if someone's noticing someone in their circle changing, maybe, hey, I always hear from like clockwork, but I haven't heard from them for a couple of weeks. Or, they've always been a really calm person, but they seem a little bit kind of tense lately. I think it's kind of just being more attuned to these little things that are happening and not trying to be their counsellor, just trying to be their kind of either their mate, their brother, their sister, their colleague, their whoever you are to that person. I think it's just about being that person, but then going, hey, I know about this service that's been created for Australia's blue collar community. Maybe you could value from some support. And I think especially, what I haven't kind of mentioned as of yet is we also provide the support to loved ones. So we provide the eight sessions, like 8 phone sessions to the blue collar community, like I've mentioned. But we also provide those 8 sessions to loved ones.
Okay,
so
that's great.
If someone, for example, has a brother or sister who's a teacher, if they're in kind of the trades or if they're in that industry because of the connection that that brother or sister has to someone in the trades, they could also get the eight counselling sessions as well. So I guess what I'm saying is if someone has someone in their life who's not in a conventional trade role or whatever, but they are themselves, they can give our card and know that person will get the 8 sessions.
Oh, how good. That's great. Where would we buy these funky shirts from for Funky Shirt Friday?
Basically, just jump on TradeMutt.com or just Google TradeMutt. It'll come up pretty quickly that way. But yeah, jump on TradeMutt.com. There's obviously a variety of different shirts, whether it be like the all-over patterns, high-vis, polos, fishing shirts, lunch boxes, flannels. Like there's a good mix on there, especially if someone's not super comfortable wearing a really, really colourful shirt. There are kind of more subtle options.
Or you could just go all out and get the shirt, the drink bottle, the hat, everything, the lunchbox, and be a real conversation piece from there. That'd be awesome.
Oh, for sure. Obviously, I'd encourage everyone to do that. But I also understand you've got to be comfortable with whatever you're behind wearing, right? So there is some kind of more subtle options. But yeah, I guess, look, we're all just trying to contribute to the community having better mental health, right? So I think whether or not it be me doing the counselling, you doing this podcast and kind of ensuring this conversation is being had, someone wearing a TradeMutt shirt, someone giving our card or our sticker or something to someone in their life, like we're all kind of doing the same thing, right? Like we're all trying to essentially improve the community's mental health. And I think we can all go about that in our own way. And I think that that's like kind of a really important thing to because just because I'm the counsellor doesn't mean that I'm doing anything more than anyone else. It's just this is my sort of part to play within the situation. And I believe that anyone, within their situation can do something to contribute, whether it's sharing a post on social media or buying a shirt. Like there's a lot of different options, and it's just about whatever you're comfortable with and understanding that if you are doing these things, you are contributing to improve mental health, in the community. And I think that's a thing that we can all sort of get on board with, obviously. And
that's it, especially with the power of social media, simply by posting or this or that, just getting it there so it's in the back of people's minds constantly to think, oh, maybe I will reach out. Maybe I will do this.
It's, this is, again, a pun, but it's like planting a seed, right? Like I think you want to, you don't necessarily, when we put our message out there, we don't necessarily assume that someone is going to reach out that second. And in fact, they may not even reach out. But if we're putting our message out there and someone goes, geez, like maybe I'll talk to that bloke at work, or maybe I'll open up a bit more to my partner. To me, that's a win. Like we're not trying to say the only option is, counseling. I think it's kind of, again, the conversation piece, right? And going, if we're kind of normalizing people approaching these kind of conversations, or even just having a deeper conversation, you know what I mean? Just going a little bit below the surface rather than just going, how you going? Good. Boys, how's your weekend? Good. See ya. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's just about kind of going a little bit deeper, and it's going to be, and how comfortable, each person is having that conversation is up to them.
Yep.
And just working in with that is fine. But obviously, we just want people to either reach out if they're struggling, to us, or to those around them. I think it's sort of as simple as that. Yeah.
Look, that's fantastic, mate. That's really, really good. And hearing you talk about this, because you keep speaking for hours, and it's fantastic. I could talk to you about this for ages, and it's really, really important what you're doing, and what a beautiful organisation to get it out there to the blue collar, which is TIACS, obviously, in association with TradeMutt. We'll need to leave it there, mate. But Kurt, thank you so much for joining us, and really know that the listeners will get a lot out of this. So really appreciate your time.
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, cheers, mate.
Absolute pleasure. And that's a wrap for this episode of The Front Garden, brought to you by Landscaping Victoria and backed by Coolabah Turf, proud supporters of the landscape industry. Don't forget to follow the podcast on your favourite platforms so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoyed today's chat, please share it with your crew, your mates, or on socials. Let's keep growing this community together. I'm Adam Hompas. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you on the next episode of The Front Garden.